Good evening.
Good evening, Rabbi.
Thank you. Eh, Hope everything is well.
Yeah, yes, my dad is much better. Yes.
All right, beautiful. That's great. Eh, Okay, so it looks like we finished the chapter. Going to the next one, Reish Lamed Hey, which is talking about Arvit. Perhaps it got deleted. I have to bring it up, I guess. Bring it up. Okay, so it says in the Bet Yosef, כשיגיע לילה יתפלל תפילת ערבית ואינה חובה. So first thing it says in the Torah is that when the night comes, you should pray Arvit, right? And he says it's not really an obligation. So we've already mentioned this several times that Arvit is considered to be like optional, according to the Talmud. And then it says, שלא נתקנה אלא כנגד איברים ופדרים. Why is it not an obligation? So he says the reason is because it was decreed corresponding to fats and limbs which are offered on the altar at night. של תמיד של בן 40. שלא נתקלו ביום, that they didn't get consumed in the daytime, so they're burning at night. שקרבים והולכים כל הלילה, so they're burning all night, those fats and limbs. כל מקום מצווה עיקר, so he says, but there is mitzvah. ואין לבטלה, so therefore he says you shouldn't nullify. What does that mean? Don't skip it, don't say, well, it's not an obligation, I'll just skip it over. They say you shouldn't do that. That's what he's saying. ורב אלפס כתב דאידנא קבוע חובה. Oh, so says the Rif, nowadays it's an obligation. What does that mean? They took it on, as a custom, to be obligatory. ואין לבטלה כלל. So therefore, right, there's no option there, right, to skip it over or whatever. Uzmana achar kriyat shema. So he says, and the time is after kriyat shema shel Arvit, after kriyat shema of Arvit, at night. דלא כרבי יהושע בן לוי דאמר תפילתה באמצע תקנון. Not like Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, who says that the prayers are in the middle. So what does that mean? They're in the middle of the Kriyat Shema. So that would mean that, according to that opinion, first you do Tefillah and then Kriyat Shema afterwards. But we don't paskin that way. Perush baboker v'Kriyat Shema v'echar kach Tefillah v'echar kach Kriyat Shema. Ela Rabbi Yochanan de'amar. Rather we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, who says, right? Rabbi Yochanan Ezeh ben Haolam Haba. So he says Rabbi Yochanan, who is the one who has a portion of the world to come? The one who juxtaposes redemption to the prayer, even in the evening. So therefore the proper time is after Kriyat Shema, and its blessings. So now the question is, when is the time for Kriyat Shema of night? It's when the Kohanim go to eat the truma in the evening. So when is that exactly? That is when the stars come out. That's what it says in the Rif. Right? Also, this rabbi. So it says if you read Kriyat Shema before you saw 3 stars, and if that was his intention, he didn't fulfill obligation. So he has to go and read it again and pray. But if it wasn't intention, and he erred, and he prayed, he doesn't have to go and pray again. That's what this rabbi also says. Even if he read it during twilight, right, which is after sunset, before dusk, which is a doubt whether it's day or night. Itab Yerushalmi shechozer v'koreh ota. It says in Yerushalmi that you have to read it again, right? In other words, you didn't fulfill your obligation there, so you got to read it again when it gets dark. Rashi also says, right, that the proper time is after the stars come out. So what do you see from here? You see that most of the Rishonim hold, right, that the proper time for Kriyat Shema is when the stars come out, and not before that.
Would that be 72 minutes after sunset or?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We don't really wait 72 minutes because we don't do like Rabbeinu Tam when it comes to Kriyat Shema.
Mm-hmm.
What we do is we do like the Geonim, which is 13 and a half minutes.
13, yes.
So round it off, we do 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Yeah, so 20 minutes after sunset, that is the time for Kriyat Shema. In most places, unless you're very, very north, right? Then your horizon is a little bit different. Like let's say you're in Greenland, right? Trump wants to get to Greenland, right? So if you live over there, you may have to wait longer, 20 minutes.
In Canada too.
Canada too. Okay. Yes. Okay. I got that. Okay. So anyway, right. The point is, right, that you got to wait longer if you live in a very northern, area, right, northern horizon. But if you live in a, more or less normal place, right, so 20 minutes is okay. That's good enough, right? Okay, so that's what it is, So you should wait 20 minutes. So what about Rabbeinu Tam, right? So Rabbeinu Tam, we fulfill when we before we go to sleep, we read Kriyat Shema again, right? So there we fulfill the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam as well. So this way, we do both, right? Just to be on the safe side, right? So you're covering all the sides there. Okay, great. Let's move on a little bit. So he says, "Uma she'anu korin ota bebet knesset en anu yotzin ba." So he says, when we read it in the shul, we don't feel the obligation, right? Why is that? Because they were praying early at that time, right? אלא במה שאנו קוראים אותה לפני מיתתנו, ואותה של בית הכנסת אינה אלא כדי לעמוד בתפילת. So he says, rather what we do is when we go home, right, before we go to sleep, we fulfill the obligation then, because in the shul it's too early, right? That's what it is. It's not yet tzita kochavim, it's not yet dusk, whatever. So because of that, we have to read it again when we go home, as we said, right? Nowadays, the proper thing to do is like this. The custom, the proper custom is if you're praying Arvit early in the shul, before, it gets dark. So what you do is you come home, and before you have your seudah, before you have your dinner, whatever. So read Kriyat Shema again, because you didn't really fulfill your obligation in the shul if you prayed early. But if you prayed late, in the shul, like, many shuls have, they pray like when it gets dark. So then you don't need to do it again when you come home. But, right, as we said, to be on the safe side, before we go to sleep, we read it again, to fulfill the obligation also of Rabbeinu Tam. And also for other reasons as well, to protect us when we're sleeping, so forth, so on. Right, so when you do it that way, you're covering all the sides, everything. You're not missing anything like that. Yeah. I do have to tell you, right, that women are, not obligated to read Kriyat Shema. So therefore, what they do, before they go to sleep is enough. They don't really have to do it, before dinner, right? To read Kriyat Shema before dinner. They're not obligated to do that. They go to sleep, and they do Kriyat Shema. The Ashkenazim, they do the first paragraph only, We Sfaradim, we do the whole thing, right? All three paragraphs. So that's the better way to do it, that's the best way. So why aren't women obligated? Because it's a positive time-bound mitzvah, Kriyat Shema. So therefore they're not obligated. But the custom is, is to say that, before, as I said, before they go to sleep. And also, in the morning, the custom is to say it before the prayers, something like that. At least the first paragraph. And that's good for the women. That's good, right? That's good enough. But technically speaking, they're not really obligated to say Kriyat Shema. But when you go to sleep, it's good for protection, to protect you from all the mazikim. From the bad dreams and all those things, right? All those things that the mazikim can do at night to keep you away from all that stuff, right? To say Kriyat Shema at night. Okay, great. So,
I do have a question.
Yes.
Wouldn't the mezuzahs protect you from all of that?
Yeah, so the thing is that the mezuzah protects the house, but Kriyat Shema is the mezuzah for your neshama.
Sorry, Danish. Okay.
You know what I mean? So this way you got double protection, right? From the outside and from the inside.
And does it see the men aware that will protect the men, correct? Some men wear the
yeah.
tzitzit.
The truth is, the tzitzit also does protect you from all kinds of things. But the truth is, it doesn't absolve you from Kriyat Shema.
Oh, okay.
So you still need Kriyat Shema.
Thank you.
But it says in the Talmud that if the guy, is a Talmid Chacham, he doesn't really need to say Kriyat Shema, because the Torah protects him, the Torah that he learns. But nowadays, he does need it, to say, the custom is that they do say it. And the reason is because some, today the Talmid Chachamim are not so strong like they used to be. In the old days, they were like learning all night, so that's why I protected them. But nowadays, sometimes they're not learning so much. So therefore, the custom is to be stringent, even for the rabbis, to read Kriyat Shema before you go to sleep.
I see.
Also, according to the Kabbalah, I have to tell you, right? Since we got into this, according to Kabbalah, what's the proper way to say Kriyat Shema before midnight? Right? So meaning what? If you're staying up late, right? Be after midnight. So then what you should do is don't wait till you go to sleep, say Kriyat Shema before midnight, like half hour before. That's what it says in the Ben Ish Chai. And this protects you, from a lot of things, a lot of bad things, So this is really the best way to do it, honestly, That's the custom of the Sfardim. What we do is, we say the Kriyat Shema, even though we already said it right before dinner or whatever, for the men, right? But when it comes to, before sleep, what you want to do is say it before midnight. So we're not talking about the regular midnight. We're talking about the halachic midnight, right? Which you'll find in your calendar, right? Your Jewish calendar, you'll find it there. Midday and midnight is the same time, right? So now here in my area, midday is like 12:53, according to the calendar, right? So what does that mean? That the midnight will also be the same thing, right? 12:53 at night, like AM. 12:53 a.m. That will be midnight. So half hour before that, right? At least half hour, right, or a little bit less. You say Kriyat Shema, and this protects you because what happens is that the neshama leaves the body to go, be judged in Shemaim before midnight. Even if you don't go to sleep.
And it
So,
encounters several angels, correct? And they can attack you.
okay, yeah. So this protects you, from all those things.
Okay.
You say Kriyat Shema before midnight.
Okay.
So this is the way we do it. The Sfardim, and my rabbi used to do it like that. I saw him, if he would be up like before midnight, he usually was. He never slept at that time. He was always learning Torah. So therefore, right, what he would do is he would say Kriyat Shema before midnight.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it. Okay, great. But if he didn't do that, right, for some reason, and whatever, he forgot, whatever it is, and the Ashkenazim also, they don't do like that. So what they do is before they go to sleep, they say it, And that's according to the Talmud, according to the regular pshat, according to the regular meaning of the whole thing. So that's the way it is, one or the other. They're both good. Okay, fantastic. So let's move on with this a little bit here. So it says, "כך כתב Rabbi Akiva." That's what Rabbi Akiva said. "שעיקר הקריאה שאדם יוצא בה שקוראים לפני ביתתו." So he says the main reading is before you go to sleep, right? Because then it's already really dark, right? In those days, by the way, it was a little bit different. I'll tell you why it's different between their custom and our custom. Because they went to sleep early, like because there was no lights at night. They didn't have electricity, So they would just have dinner and go to bed. Because there was no lights. So that, and then they would wake up, either, in the middle of the night to learn Torah or, in the morning, right? Whatever it is. The point is, right, that they went to sleep very early, right? And we go to sleep very late, right? We stay up long. Why? Because we have electricity, and so we can do activities in the night. So therefore, for us, we shouldn't wait till we go to sleep to say Kriyat Shema. What we should do is do it before dinner. I'm talking for the men, right? Not for the women. The women don't need that. Okay, so that's the way it goes. That's the proper thing to do. So nowadays, instead of waiting until you go to sleep, you do it before dinner, right? This way, you cover everything there. But it has to be already like dark. What does that mean? 3 stars came out. It doesn't have to be pitch dark. 20 minutes after sunset, it's good enough already. That's good enough. Okay, great. מחמת זה כתב שצריך לברך עליה, ברוך אתה השם אלוקינו מלך העולם, אשר קדישנו במצוותיו וציוונו, על קריאת שמע. So Rabbi Akiva held that you have to make a blessing there also. ורבנו תם כתב, ודאי אותה של בית הכנסת היא עיקר. Rabbeinu Tam says not like that. He says no, right? The main Kriyat Shema is what you say in the shul, even though you're praying early, right? Shekorin ota b'birkotea, because we read it with the blessings together. Ma she'anu korin ota kodem tzet kochavim. So he says that which we do it also, before before dusk, right? Before the stars come out. Mishum dekaim alan ke Rabbi Yehuda. So because we pass like Rabbi Yehuda, it says the amar zman tfilat mincha ad plaga mincha. He paskins, as we already mentioned before, that the mincha time is like at plaga mincha. That's the last time, which is before sunset, as we already mentioned. Shehu sha'a v'ravia kodem halayla, which is an hour and a quarter before night. Mishum ve'elach u'misham ve'elach chashiv layla, and then afterwards, right, it's already considered to be night. Regarding the mincha prayer. Same thing also applies to Kriyat Shema. Misham ve'elach hu zmana, that the time is from there and onward. Okay, great. Right? That's what it says also, this rabbi. Since the rabbis didn't give a particular time, right, for the evening prayer, so you see from there that it starts from the time you finish mincha. Zman tefillah ha'erev. Then he starts the time for Arvit. Veiksha Adoni Averosa al divrei Rabbeinu Tam. So the Rosh asked a question about Rabbeinu Tam's opinion. So he says, Nehe nami she'en zman tefillat mincha ki im ad plaga mincha. Even if you tell me, right, the mincha time is only until plaga mincha, hainu mishum shehi keneged tamid. That's only because it corresponds to the communal sacrifice of the evening. Uzmana lo haya ki im ad plaga mincha, and the time was only until plaga mincha. Aval Kriyat Shema shetalui bezman, but it says when it comes to Kriyat Shema, which depends on the zman shechiva, depends on the time of lying down, right? It's not proper to read at that time because it's not yet the time to lie down. It's not the time yet to go to sleep. Too early, right? Because it's not dark yet. So the Ri says that according to in order to uphold the custom, Shanu Sovrim Keshar Tanaim, that we hold like the remainder of the Tanaim. Shela Braita, of that Braita, not like Rabbi Yehuda, right? Shemakdimin Zman Kriyat Shema letzet kochavim. That they say Kriyat Shema comes before, right? The stars come out. So it says even though halacha is not like Rabbi Eliezer, sheomer mishash kidesh hayom be'arvei Shabbatot, that says that from the time that right the new day has started, right, on the eve of Shabbat, can I get Rabbi Yoshua corresponding to Rabbi Yoshua, ושאומר משעה שהכהנים נכנסים לאכול בתרומתן, so he says that from the time that the Kohanim come in to eat the Truma, ולא הלכה כרבי מאיר כנגד רבי יהודה. So you don't pass like Rabbi Meir when he argues with Rabbi Yehuda. כל מקום לעניין תפילת הקלו, but he says when it comes to prayers they were lenient, וגם מתוך הדוחק נהגו כן. So he says also because of the it's a pressing situation. They were accustomed to do like that. So why is that? Because the community, right, comes to pray mincha. So if they wouldn't do Arvit afterwards or in read Shema, if they would wait until stars come out, so what would happen is that everybody would go home, and then they wouldn't do the mitzvah of praying Arvit. And they would have to come back, and that would be hard for them come back again. So they wouldn't pray with a minyan. So he says, therefore, that was a custom, that to rely on these Tanaim in this Braita. So it says, even though you really shouldn't read Kriyat Shema before stars come out, like the regular meaning of the Mishnah. Says even according to Rabbi Yehuda, you really shouldn't be so quick to read it. While still day, before stars come out. So it says because it's not really a big difference between the Tanaim of the Mishnah, ben Tanai de Braita, and all the Tanaim of the Braita. Shalu, okay, that's all right. I guess we can stop there. We almost finished the whole chapter here. So let's go back to the tour and see what we got. I'm sorry, the Bet Yosef. Let's go back to Bet Yosef. So it says Bet Yosef that, as we said, right, once the night comes, it's the time for Arvit. So you got to pray Arvit. Pashut bekama duchtis. So it says, right, it comes in several places in the Talmud, this teaching. Right, where is it? Brachot kaf zayin amud bet. The Tfilat Arvit Rashut, right? That it says there that Arvit is only optional; it's not really an obligation. And because it was decreed, right, corresponding to the limbs and fats that are burned on the altar. Where is that? Also in Berachot Kaf Vav Amud Bet. But it's not what you said, right? That nevertheless it's mitzvah, so you shouldn't, right? Just disregard it. Ken katu sham tosfot. That's what it says in tosfot. She'en levatala. You shouldn't disregard the arvit. Ela mipnei mitzvot acheret haoveret. Unless you have some other mitzvah going on, right? Which is time bound, so you can't really do both of them at the same time. והראש כתב נהי שהיא רשות אין לבטלה אם לא מפני צורך שעה. So says the Rosh, right, even though it is optional, you really shouldn't disregard it, Arvit, unless it's like something, there's a pressing need there. כגון מפני מצוות עוברת. For instance, there's a mitzvah you're gonna, right, which is gonna pass if you don't do it now. ושאר המיינה דלה מטרחינן, so he already, right, took off his belt, and we don't right, bother him now, right? בפרק כמה דשבת. Where is this in Shabbat tet amud bet? וכן עלה על מיטתו בירושלמי. And also, right, it says if he went already to bed, he went to bed. Then matachinam nato lired. Right. So, right, we don't bother him and say, oh, you know what, get back up and do arvit, right? You missed it. Sorry, If he already went to bed, we just say, we'll let you be, That's it. You went to bed. וכן כתבו תוספות, that's what it says in תוספות also. פרק כמה דשבת, וכיוצא בזה הם דברי רבינו יונה. Rabbeinu Yona also says this, שכתב בראש פרק תפילת השחר, because he says, right, in this perek, which is Yud Chet Tamud Aleph, right, which is in Brachot also, שנראים לו דברי רי, so he says that he agrees with the words of the ri, right, which is Rabbi Yehuda shekatav dehad yamin on tefillat arvit reshut, that which we said that arvit is just optional. Hainu lomar she'ena chova. That means it's not an obligation k'shar tefillot like all the other prayers. But mitzvah you can't. But there is a mitzvah. The mitzvah legabe chova reshut karele. Because when it's just a mitzvah, not an obligation, we call that optional. Okay, great. So that's the Bet Yosef. We got more. Let's move on. Yeah, we got plenty of more here. Okay, we'll go step by step. Continue. Right, so now it goes on. The Arif katav de'ayidina kavua chova. So says the Rif, right? Nowadays it's an obligation. So what does that mean? They took it on as an obligation, as a custom. Ken katav perek tfilat shachar. That's what it says in tfilat shachar. Yutet Amud Aleph or perek kama de Shabbat. Also on Shabbat. Dal Amud Aleph. V'chen katav gam ken harosh. Sham. The Rosh also says this. V'chen katav Rambam. Also Rambam. Perek Aleph Minchot Tfilah. Laws of prayers. V'harosh hiksha al zeh. So the Rosh has a question on this, right? Beresh perek tfilat shachar over there. V'chakak katav stam divrei arif. And then afterwards he writes the words of the Rif. So he says, regarding what we said, that if he already took off his belt, or or he started to eat his dinner, do we still obligate him, right, to stop, and do Arvit? We're going to deal with that later on, he says. What is the proper time, as we said, right, after you do Kriyat Shema of Arvit? The Lo Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, not like Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. So it says regarding this, the Beit Yosef, Plukta de Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. It's a machloket between these two rabbis. Where is this? Beresh berachot, in the beginning of brachot, dal amud bet, upasko poskim ki Rabbi Yochanan. They pass like Rabbi Yochanan. So what does that mean? As we already mentioned, right, that we do first Kriyat Shema and then the Tefillah, but not the other way around. Okay, so umimatai zman Kriyat Shema shel Arvit. So then we ask the question, right, in the tour, when does the time of Kriyat Shema start? We already said, right, when the stars come out. Beresh brachot. So where is this? Also in brachot, Bet Amud Aleph. Katav sham Rabbeinu Yonah. So it says Rabbeinu Yonah there. That which we said, right? That when the stars come out, it's already night. What are we talking about? We're talking about middle-sized stars, and it has to be 3 of them. Once you have that, it's already night. Right? Where do we say this? In Lamed Amud Aleph. And since, right, people are not so expert, to know which one are the large stars and the medium-sized stars. We need medium size for this purpose, right? So therefore he says what you should do is wait until you see the small ones, because we don't really know how to tell, the difference between this and that. So what about if it's a cloudy day, right? You can't see the stars. So then you got to wait until the doubt, leaves your mind. By the way, in those days, they couldn't do like what we do, because we have, like very accurate watches and clocks, things like this. And so we know exactly when it comes. So we don't have to look in the heavens, to see. We don't need to use that. We just look at our clock, right? And we see what time it is. So then we know, right, what we have to do. It's very simple. In those days, they didn't have things like that. Okay. In this book, it says, Katuv le'inyan Kriyat Shema. When it comes to Kriyat Shema, it says, Mishash nireh shnei kochavim. It says over there 2 stars, right? We said 3 stars. Nikra Laila, it's already called night. V'eni yodea minayin lo zeh. So it says, I don't know where he got this from. In other words, we say 3, he says 2. I don't know. How did he get to 2? That's the question. Okay, great. So it goes on. Mash katav Rabbeinu b'shem Rab Paltoy. That's what you said, the name of this Gaon, Rab Paltoy, that if you read beforehand, right? Mashma davka im itpalel shmona esrei kamar. That implies, he says, but Yosef, they're talking about before he did shmona esrei, before he did the Amidah. Deno chozer mishum ditfilat derabanan. So he doesn't have to go back and do it again. Why? Because prayer is only rabbinical. So when there's a doubt, we don't have to do it again. Aval im kara kriyat shema chozer. But he says if he read Kriyat Shema, he has to read again. So he says, but it's a little bit difficult. Why? Because in the beginning, his words seem to refer to Kriyat Shema, and that also has to be the end of his words. So he says, therefore, it seems to me that when he reads Kriyat Shema, Nami, also, Mayre is talking also about that. Ubklal ta'ah v'itpalel have. So it's considered to be like you made a mistake and prayed. Now Mikriyat Shema, that's also Kriyat Shema. Mash katav Rabbeinu b'shem Rashi, and that which the two wrote named Rashi. Gam mash katav b'shem Rabbeinu Tam, also named Rabbeinu Tam. Hakol beresh brachot b'divrei Tosfot. It all is brought down in Tosfot, right? In brachot bet Amud Aleph. Be'arosh, also the Rosh there. Mash katav v'iksha Adoni Avir Rosh Sal. And that which he said, the Rosh had a question. Al divrei Rabbeinu Tam, regarding Rabbeinu Tam's opinion. Nehe nami she'en zman tfilat mincha ki im ad plag mincha. Even if you tell me the time of mincha is only until plag mincha, ad afal gav l'chadchila en likrota kodem tzet kochavim, and you shouldn't read it before. He said right before the stars come out, kistama dematnitin, like the regular meaning of the Mishnah. Kol zeh divrei Rosh sham. So he says all this is in the words of the Rosh. Mash katav, and then what she wrote the Torah. You shouldn't, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, he says you shouldn't really read it early. So this comes from the Tur that seems proper. So he said they're correct what he's saying. So again, right, to reiterate, what did he say? He said that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, right, who says that the time of Mincha is only until Plag Mincha, nevertheless he says, right, but don't do Arvit so early anyway, right? Wait till it gets dark. 3 stars come out, nevertheless. So, fine. Katvat Tosfot, says Tosfot, Beresh Perek Tfilat HaShachar, right over there in this Perek. Gabe Yaakov Tiken Tfilat Arvit. So there the Chazal said, right, the sages, that who instituted the Arvit? This was Yaakov Avinu. Tema de Amina Perek Kida Nashe. So he says it's wondrous. Why? Because we're saying this Perek in Chulin, Tzadik Aleph Amud Bet, when he came to Haran, right, Yaakov Avinu, he wanted to return. Says whatever, according to what I explained, that we hold like Rabbi Yehuda, he says like mincha, it comes out well. So then our custom is good. So if that would be the case, right, it would be good to pray during the daytime, Arvit. Shalu l'Rav Hai. He's asked Rav Hai, Tzibur shemakdimim likot litpalel. So they asked him like this, right? If the community is reading early Kriyat Shema and Arvit, kodem tzedek kochavim. So what does that mean? They're not waiting for the stars to come out. So yeah, we got to read that inside the Torah. Let's go inside the Torah. Yeah, so what does it say here? It says, so it says, what's better? To pray with them, early, and then leave Kriyat Shema until Tzedek Kochavim, or leamtin ad Tzedek Kochavim. Or should we wait till Tzedek Kochavim with Pel B'Yachid and then pray, individual, without the minyan? Which is better? In order there should be, right, Geulah, redemption, juxtaposed to the prayer. So answers Rav Hai Gaon, better to pray with them with a minyan, right, than to pray later by yourself. Why? Because we want to have a minyan. As long as it's already plag mincha or afterwards. And then what you do is, right, wait to Kriyat Shema, to do Kriyat Shema after the time comes. That's what they used to do in the old days, right? What they would do is not read Kriyat Shema at all. And then they would wait, until it gets dark and then do Kriyat Shema with the blessings afterwards. Today we do it a little bit different. What we do today is that we do everything, we read everything, and then we repeat the Kriyat Shema again right afterwards, in order to fulfill the obligation, right, of most of the poskim who say you have to wait until it gets 3 stars. Okay, great. So let's move on. So it says, what about the end, right? When is the last time to say Kriyat Shema? Now we said we know what's the first time. The first time is, right, once the stars come out. The last time, Tanan ad sof hashmoret arishona ve'ish shalish lalayla. So there is one opinion that says like 1/3 of the night. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. That's going to Rabbi Eliezer. Chamim omrim atzit chatzot. The rabbis say until midnight. Rabbi Gamliel omer ad she'aleh amud hashachar. Rabbi Gamliel says until dawn. V'lecha ki Rabban Gamliel. We pass like Rabban Gamliel. So meaning what? You can say Kriyat Shema until the dawn. Because he passed like that in the Talmud. So it says, according to this opinion, even lechatchila you can wait until that time. Okay. But he says, you know what? Don't eat or sleep before Kriyat Shema till you read it. Tanya lo yeheh adam ba min hasadeh, because it says in the Braita that a person shouldn't come from the field, working whatever, from his job, the erev in the evening, v'amar, and he say like this, right? Ochal kima, I'll eat a little bit, v'yeshen kima, and I'll sleep a little bit, v'ekran, then I'll do Kriyat Shema, afterwards. V'yitpalel, and then I'll pray Arvit afterwards. V'nimtza chotafto shina, so what's going to be, right? He's going to fall asleep. V'ashen kol, he's going to sleep all night. Ela adam, that's not a good thing, right? He's going to miss it. Ela adam ba min hasadeh, rather, the proper thing to do is when he comes from work, right? When nichnas lebet knesset, so go into the shul, right? Or lebet midrash, or into the yeshiva, right? The study hall. Im ragil likot kore. So if he's accustomed to read at that time, read at that time. V'im ragil lishanot shoneh. Even if he's accustomed to learn at that time, let him learn. V'koreh Kriyat Shema u'mitpalel. So then he reads Kriyat Shema and prays. V'achar kach ochel pito, and then he's going to have his dinner. So it says, whoever transgresses the words of the rabbis, chayav mita, he's liable to death. So what does that mean? He doesn't do it this way, So what does he do? He eats dinner and goes to sleep, and then says, I'll wake up and do Kriyat Shema later. That's no good, right? So he says regarding that, chayav mita, he's liable to death if he does like that. So he says, you see from there that once the time of Kriyat Shema has come, don't now do a seudah, your dinner, right, until you pray first. But if he was, for some reason, right, unable to do so, and he didn't read Kriyat Shema until the dawn, so then he could read it until the sunrise, b'diavad, right? If he was anus, if he was forced, so he made a mistake, whatever, or he was forced to do so for some circumstance. But he says if he reads it after the dawn, lo yomar ashkibenu, don't say ashkibenu, this blessing. She'ena tazman ashkiba. Why? Because it's not the time to go to bed anymore. It's too late. It's already morning. So this rabbi says, so he says, for sure you have to say 2 blessings before the Kriyat Shema and 2 blessings after, like we do at night. Not the women, of course. But he says, don't do the same text of the blessing as usual. Say it like this instead. So he says, the Rosh says, okay, I'm going a little bit too far here. Let's go back to Bet Yosef. I went a little bit too far. Okay, so let's see Bet Yosef. So he brings this tshuva of Rabbi Gaon that we just read a couple of minutes ago. Teshuvah zo ketavua rosh ve'arashba. These rabbis brought the tshuva of Rabbi Gaon. Beresh brachot, right in the beginning of brachot. V'zeh lashon tshuva beretz Yisrael. So this is the language of the tshuva of Rabbi Gaon. It says in Eretz Israel, Osin ken umitpalin shel Arvit. What we do is, that we do Arvit, and then we read Kriyat Shema afterwards, because it's too early. Right, the proper time. We're not really concerned about juxtaposing the Geulah, the redemption, to the Tefillah. Shel Arvit of Arvit. Vechazinan di Kriyat Shema beonata. So he says then comes out, right, that the Kriyat Shema is said in the proper time. What does that mean? When the stars come out, it's preferable to do that than to juxtapose the prayer to the Geulah. When it's not possible to pray. So he says, but if he did pray at first, with the community, as a optional thing, and then the second one. So first one will be optional, second one will be obligation. Shapir dam, it's good. Adkan, it's the end of the tshuva. Okay. Okay, great. Let's move on. Teshuvah zo. We said this already. Let's move on. Well, תרומת הדשן, so he said, תרומת הדשן כתב שבימי הקיץ נהגו לקרוא קריאת שמע ומתפלל תפילת ערבית 3 או 4 שעות לפני אצל הכוכבים. Oh, look what he says, right? So this is the custom which is brought down in the Ramah also. We're going to see this, right? The Ashkenazim in Europe, their custom was to pray Arvit very, very early, right? Super, super early, right? Which means that it was before Plaga Mincha even, right? Even before that time. So he says in the summer, this is the custom, right? That they read early. So he says, how early are we talking about? 3 or 4 hours before, right, sunset, right? Which means that it's super, super early. Right? So he says, and he tried to give, some justification to this, right? That's incredible, because it's very hard to justify something like that, right? Which is against all the sages, which say that who say you can't do this. ורבנו יונה כתב שם שדת רבנו היי שמתפלל עם הציבור. So he says Rabbeinu Yonah over there that according to Rav Hai, he holds שמתפלל עם הציבור בית הכנסת, person who prayed with the community in the shul ויקרא קריאת שמע, and then he reads קריאת שמע כמו שקורא בפסוקים, just like he reads these verses כדי להתפלל בתוך דברי תורה, in order they should pray after saying some words of Torah, right, which is the קריאת שמע, כמו שאמרו בירושלמי, like it says in ירושלמי, ולא יקרא ברכות וגם לא יענה אמן בכוונה. So he says you shouldn't read the blessings at the time or answer amen, לצאת ידי חובה, to fulfill the obligation, אלא אם ירצה לאומרם עם הקהל. So he says, therefore, if he wants to say them with the community, בלא חתימה, without the blessing, ובלא פתיחה, and also not opening, הרשות בידו, he can do that if he wants to. ומאחר יציאת הכוכבים, קורא קריאת שמע עם ברכותיה. So he says, then after the stars come out, he will read the קריאת שמע with the blessings, לצאת ידי חובתו, in order to fulfill the obligation, וקודם שהביא דברי רבנו, before he brought the words of Rabbi, כתב תיקון אחר, he also writes another way to fix this up, to rectify. שבבית הכנסת יקרא קריאת שמע, that you could, in the shul, you could say קריאת שמע, עם ברכותיה, with the blessings, והתפלל, and then pray, ולא יתכוון לצאת ידי חובת קריאת שמע. And then don't have the intention to fulfill the obligation of קריאת שמע, באותה קריאה, with that reading, אלא לעמוד בתפילה בתוך דברי תורה, just to read some דברי תורה before the prayer. ויוצא ידי קריאת ברכות, and he does fulfill the obligation when he reads the blessings, ואחר יציאת הכוכבים, and then once the stars come out, קורא אותה והתכוון לצאת ידי חובתו. Then he reads it, and with the intention to fulfill his obligation. ואם לא ירצה לקרות אלא שתי פרשיות, סגילה. So it says, if he only wants to read just the first 2 paragraphs, that's good enough. באחי, דכיוון שהזכיר יציאת מצרים, so he says, because since he mentioned, right, the Exodus from Egypt, כשקרא אותה בבית הכנסת, when he read in the shul, לא מצליחינן להזכירה פעם אחרת. So we don't obligate him to read it, mention it again. כדי שלא יקרא אותה בלא ברכה. In order that he shouldn't read it without a blessing. כתב שאומר ברכת אהבה, כתב שאומר ברכת אהבת עולם לבדה. So he shouldn't read out the blessing, he says, and then he's going to read, right, this blessing אהבת עולם by itself. ואם תאמר, that's the end of it. ואם תאמר היח הוא אומר ברכות קריאת שמע בבית הכנסת. So he says, if you're going to ask me, how is he doing blessings of קריאת שמע in the shul? כיוון שאינו יוצא ידי חובת קריאת שמע באותה קריאה. Even though he's not fulfilling the obligation of קריאת שמע with that reading. הרי הן ברכות לבטלה, so he says, therefore it turns out that the blessings are also in vain. כתב הרשב"א בתשובה, the Rashba already answered that problem. אל תטמא דברכות קריאת שמע אינן ברכות של קריאת שמע ממש. So he says, you shouldn't wonder that really, right, the truth is that the blessings of Kriyat Shema are really not the blessings of Kriyat Shema, right, literally, כברכת Torah, like the blessings of the Torah, or ברכת המצוות, and the blessings of the mitzvot. שאם כן היה לנו לברך לקרות את שמע, so he says, if that was the case, we would have had to bless, right, to read the Shema, אלא ברכות הן שניתקנו בפני עצמן. Rather, he says the blessings are really like a separate entity, not really, dependent on the Kriyat Shema itself. אלא שתיקנו לאומנם בפני Kriyat Shema. Rather, what it is that they decreed to say before the Kriyat Shema, ולאחריו, and also afterwards. לכן כי הסכימו הגאונים, that's what the Gaonim said. Wow, so therefore the Rashba solves this problem. Wow. Of how we do this. That's very interesting and very important. כתב עוד רבנו יונה, says רבנו יונה, ומי שירצה להחמיר עצמו, he says whoever wants to be stringent on himself, יכול לעשות בדרך אחרת, you can do a different way. יותר נכונה, a better way, he says. There's a better solution. Right? שיקרא בבית הכנסת קריאת שמע הברכות. So what is that? Read in the shul, right? The Kriyat Shema and the blessings, בלא חתימה, without sealing them, ופתיחה or opening them, והתפלל עם הציבור באותה תפילה, and then pray with the community, the עמידה, באותה תפילה יתפלל לשם חובה, and that will be, right, the obligation of Arvit. שהרי איברים פדרים של עולות נדבה, so it's because that's when the time where the fats and limbs are burnt, right, of the עולה offering, right? נמי קרבים כל הלילה. So he says, because those can be brought all night, and then once stars come out, he's going to read Kriyat Shema Birkotea with the blessings, with the opening, Chatimot, with all the sealing and opening. And then praise Arvit, L'Shem Nedava, and it's going to be like optional prayer. Wow. So he says, in that manner, everything will come out, everything will come out rectified. שאותה שבית הכנסת תהיה לעמוד בתפילה, because that Kriyat Shema that you read in the shul will be, to stand in prayer. מתוך דברי תורה, after saying words of Torah, ואחר כך יקרא קריאת שמע בעונתה, and then you're going to read קריאת שמע in the proper time, ויסמוך גאולה לתפילה, and then you're going to juxtapose the redemption with the tefillah, ומה שמתפלל אותם בנדבה, and that what she's saying, the Amidah now, right at home, as an optional prayer, כדי לסמוך גאולה לתפילה, in order that we should juxtapose גאולה to the תפילה, הווה כמו שמחדש דבר בתפילתו, considered to be like he's, right, saying something new there in his prayer, ואין צריך לחדש בה דבר אחר, and you don't have to, right, say anything new besides that. That's good enough. והכל בו כתב בשם רבנו יצחק בן גיאת. כל בו says the name of this rabbi. דרך זה, also in this manner, בסוף כתב, and in the end he writes, אבל צריך כוונה גדולה לזה. So he says, but you need to have a lot of, right, concentration for this. You need lots of concentration. שיתפלל בבית הכנסת וחוזר ומתפלל פעם אחת. So why is that? Because you're coming to pray again at home, a donated prayer, and you need to concentrate on that, because now you're praying alone. The Torah also writes in this chapter, 234, name of the Rosh, so you shouldn't pray a donated prayer, we don't really do this today. Unless you really know for sure, Zahir, Zariz, that you're very careful, to have concentration. You can have right, proper intention and concentration, until from beginning till the end. Right, without diverting your mind into other things. So he says, right, so he says, what's halacha? Bottom line, right? Time for the bottom line. You do have to read Kriyat Shema when? After, right, the stars come out. Right? That's halacha. And use one of these methods, right, which we just mentioned, right? Do one of these methods. As we said, right, the method which is widely used today is to do Kriyat Shema, everything, right, with the prayers, the blessings and Amidah. We do everything in the shul, and then when we come home, before we have dinner, right, we read Kriyat Shema again to read in the right time. That's how we do it today, We don't do Tfilat Nedava, donated prayer. We don't do blessings again, right? All that stuff. We already did everything in the shul, except the Kriyat Shema, right? Just to be fully obligation. Okay, great. That's a custom nowadays. And even though Mordechai says Beshem Raviyah, name is Rabbi, Nireli Ikar Divrei Rabbeinu Tam, that he holds like Rabbeinu Tam. So he says, so it says we're going to be right, stringent. When it comes to Kriyat Shema, to read it at night, it's saying, you're being like arrogant because you're being stringent a little bit too much. שכל העושה דבר שאינו צריך לעשותה. So it says, because whoever does anything is not obligated to do, נקרא idiot, is considered to be like a commoner. אלא אם כן, הורגל בפרישות. Unless he's regular, right, to be stringent, and pious. בשאר דברים, when it comes to other things. עד כאן, that's the end of it. נראה אפילו במקום שנהגו הציבור לקרוא קריאת שמע מבעוד יום. So it says, even, it seems like, right, it seems like even if the community is accustomed to say Kriyat Shema while it's still day, right, in the shul, יש לכל אדם לעשות בעניין שיקרא קריאת שמע בעונתה. So a person should, right, when he goes home, read it again, right, in the proper time. דכיוון דלדעת כמה גדולים, because since according to some, right, the big rabbis, לא יצא ידי חובה בקריאת שמע בכנסת, he didn't feel obligation when he read in the shul, לא מיקסה קירה. That's not really arrogant, right, because, there's a big machloket about that. So, in other words, comes Bet Yosef and tells you, you should be stringent about this. That's the thing, Okay, great. So I guess we'll stop here. We'll pick it up next time. B'ezrat Hashem. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Laila Tov, Chazak u'Baruch, and we'll see you tomorrow. B'ezrat Hashem. All the best.
Shabbat Shalom. We see you.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Shabbat Shalom. Right. So we'll see you on Sunday. B'ezrat Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All the best.